Good afternoon. We'll call the meeting back to order. We have a presentation from, is it Welaschuk? Welaschuk Associates. And welcome. I'm sorry we're running a little bit late this afternoon.
No problem. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, if we can just push that button.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it. And if you can just introduce yourself, sir.
Yep. Meetings are recorded. Great, thank you. My name's Ivan Welaschuk, and I'm the appraiser that has the contract with the county to do appraisals under for municipal reserve purposes. And I'm here to talk to you about how we do those appraisals and some of the aspects of those appraisals because of the way the Act is written and the definitions within that Act that affect value. I had the opportunity to take a look at the video of the meeting early or late November when Council chatted about municipal reserve and valuations of those reserves. And so I have a sense of what it is you're wanting to know about, but if I don't touch on any of those things, don't hesitate to ask questions. What I intend to do is to very quickly go over the appraisal process, the way we do an appraisal, and focus on municipal reserve appraisals specifically, and then we'll talk about some of the provisions under the Act that define how we do municipal reserve valuations. So with that, I do have a PowerPoint up on my screen, and worked.
Maybe. Sometimes if the PowerPoint's set up a certain way, it won't go on the screen.
So Mr. Parkin asked me to talk a little bit about how appraisers are regulated in Alberta. I did provide a one-page document. I don't know if you received it or not. I'm just going to quickly go over that. Appraisers are licensed in Alberta under the Real Estate Council of Alberta, or RECA, under the Real Estate Act. We must be licensed in order to perform appraisal work or to say we're an appraiser. In order to be licensed, the Act says you have to be accredited by one of three organizations: the Appraisal Institute of Canada, Canadian National Association of Real Estate Appraisers, or CNAREA, or the Alberta Assessors Association. There is an education requirement in order to become a candidate, and these requirements vary from organization to organization, but essentially there's some sort of post-secondary education that's required in order to become a candidate. Once you're a candidate, there's a specified number of hours of education that's required, either provided by the organization or through a third party. And then there's a requirement for a certain number of hours of work supervised by an accredited appraiser. And then there's some exams that you have to pass as well. There are some colleges and universities in Canada that offer courses in assessment and appraisal, and so that covers off some of your educational requirement. In addition, once you're accredited, then there's a continuing education requirement. You have to have professional liability insurance. And there is a complaint process that RECA and each of the accrediting organizations have in case there's an appraiser that's whose work is not meeting the standards. All of these associations have published standards, and they also have a code of conduct or a code of ethics. So those are things that appraisers can be disciplined for, and there's various sorts of penalties, including losing your accreditation or having your license pulled. So we are quite regulated. If you want to know what a parcel is worth, the only way to really find out is to put it up for sale and see what it sells for. Obviously, that's not practical in a lot of situations, so then we get into an appraisal situation. And what I want to stress on this slide is that it's an independent analysis of value, and it's prepared by an unbiased appraiser with no interest in the property, either current interest or contemplated interest. And all appraisals have to have a signed certification page, and that's one of the things that the appraiser certifies, is that they have no interest in the property. It's an independent analysis. We can't have any interest in the outcome of the appraisal. I'm going to get into the appraisal process and just touch on some of the basic steps, and again focusing on how that applies to municipal reserve appraisals. We have to define the client and the intended user. The client is, in this case, is Wheatland County. They're the ones who order the appraisal, and they're the ones who pay the invoice. The owner of the property is an intended user. So clearly we prepare an appraisal report expecting that the owner will have a look at it. We have to define the purpose of the appraisal, and the purpose of an appraisal often determines the definition of value. In this case, the appraisal is done under Section 667 of the Municipal Government Act, and we're going to get into that in a little more detail in a couple of slides. We have to set out the scope of the appraisal. So what do? We have to make it clear what we've done to come up with that number, and in order to get the value, we do the same sort of analysis regardless of how much reporting we do, how extensive the report is. It costs money to prepare a report, so some clients want as little reporting as possible. They just want the number and the highlights. And if you're doing a report that's going to go to court, then you have to spend a lot of time making sure everything is well explained and well supported. So those are the things that would be set out in the scope. And then the effective date. We can do an appraisal going back all the way to, I guess, as far back as we can find sales. And we can also do an appraisal of theoretical properties that don't yet exist. So that effective date is very important. And one of the things we're going to come back to is under Section 667, municipal reserve appraisals have an effective date within a window of 35 days after the subdivision application is deemed complete. So a lot of things happen once the subdivision application is deemed complete. The clock starts ticking on referrals, on advertising, on those sorts of things, and it also defines the effective date for an appraisal. The next thing we want to do is understand the property. So we look at the title, what sort of restrictions there might be on title. We look at zoning, planning. We look at the property characteristics. We look at the area to see what sort of influences there are within the area, the road system, how close they are to urban centers, anything that might impact value or marketability. And then We also look at the local real estate market to see what's happening in the market, what drives the local economy, and are those drivers tending in a positive or negative direction, so that we get a sense of those kinds of things. Once we have that, we get into the analysis, and the first thing that we do is determine the highest and best use of the parcel. And I've put up the shortest definition that I could find of highest and best use. It has to be something that's reasonably probable. It's got to be a legal use. It's got to be physically possible on that piece of property. It's got to be appropriately supported. So does it have the kind of access, the kind of infrastructure that might be required to do whatever it is you think is reasonable to do on that property? Has to be financially feasible. There's no point in doing something that's not economic. And it has to result in the highest value for that property. The reason this is an important step is because this is what determines what properties are considered comparable. So when we start looking for comparable sales, we have to make sure that they're the same highest and best use as the subject. We get into the appraisal process. There's 3 approaches to value. The one that's most relevant for municipal reserve purposes is the sales comparison value, where we look at sales, we make adjustments to those sales so that they reflect the characteristics of the subject property, and then we can use that to come up with the value for the subject property. We identify and verify market transactions, and there's a definition for market transactions. Again, I've used a very simple definition here. It's a willing seller, willing buyer, but it's more than just willing. They have to be informed. The property has to be reasonably exposed to the market, no undue motivation, typical financing, so the seller can't be taking back a mortgage or part of the mortgage as part of the deal. This is somewhat challenging in parts of the county because we do have sales between unrelated parties, but often they've got some sort of a relationship. They might have been renting that piece of property for 10 years or 15 years. There might be something in the rental agreement that gives them first right of refusal, or they may just decide they're going to sell the property to one another without anybody else getting involved in the process. The neighbors don't know the property sold until a week or 2 after. So clearly those aren't market transactions. So we have to go through and make sure that the sales that we're using reflect market. And so we'll come up with a list of sales. These are sales that occurred in the south of Strathmore between July 7, 2017 and June 2018. And there's quite a range of value there. The higher priced properties have irrigated acres. The lower priced properties are pasture land that's got little or no capability for cultivation. And then there's all kinds of other factors that influence those prices. What we do is look at all of the factors that can affect value, and we look at what sort of adjustments we have to make to those sales to bring them to reflect the characteristics of the subject. If the subject is on a highway, then what sort of adjustment do we make for similar properties that aren't located on a highway? Those kinds of things. Ideally, those adjustments come directly from the sales data. If the sales data isn't sufficient to do that, then we'll use industry benchmarks taken from the Calgary Real Estate Board. Farm Credit provides an annual survey of farmland values, Canada Mortgage and Housing. There's all kinds of industry benchmark, industry statistics that we can use. We then use those to adjust the sales, and out of those adjusted sales we come up with a range of value for the subject. If we don't have enough quantitative data, then we can do a qualitative analysis, sort of comparing the properties, whether they're superior or inferior to one another. And when you don't have data, that's what you're left with doing. Once we've got those adjusted sales, we can determine from those what the value of the subject should be, and it should be fairly obvious once we make those adjustments where that value is going. Sometimes we don't have the right kind of sales. We can't generate sales. We have to take what's out there. So in the second bullet, the example is a 40-acre parcel, and my sales are 25, 30, 34, 58, and 75 acres in size. We can use a statistical model or a mathematical equation to indicate what the value of the 40 acres should be given the data that we have got for sales parcels that are larger and smaller. We can also use a subset of the sales that we've got. And the key thing here is that the value that we conclude for the subject property should flow directly from the sales and from that analysis. One of the pet peeves of every appraiser is that nobody ever reads the appraisal report. You look at the number and you either agree with the number or you disagree with the number. But until you read the appraisal report, you don't know how we get that number. And so it's very important to understand what the property is, what assumptions we might have made, the highest and best use, what the effective date is, what the purpose of the appraisal is, and then look at the data and how we analyze the data and how we get to the number that we get to. So again, hopefully if you read the appraisal report, the number that comes out of that report, it should be fairly transparent and obvious once you've read the report. So now let's get into the municipal reserves and school reserves. Section 666 allows the owner that applies for a subdivision to provide up to 10% of the value of the parcel of the land as municipal reserve or as school reserve. And they can either provide money in place of or a combination of money, but it can't be more than 10% of the value. Let's go to the next section, 667. And this is if money in place of municipal or school reserve is required, the applicant must provide a market value appraisal of the existing parcel of land as of a specified date occurring within that 35-day window following the date on which the application is made. Again, the application is deemed complete. So two things there that are important. It's the existing parcel of land that's applied to, that's going to be subdivided, and the effective date is that 35-day window. The appraisal is done on the basis of what might be expected to be realized if the land were in an unsubdivided state. So that total parcel sold in the open market, willing seller to willing buyer on the date in which the appraisal is made. Again, the appraisal has to be done within that 35-day window. And then if money is required, it's up to the municipality, to the subdivision authority to determine what that number is. Now, it's up to council to determine what their policy is when they wish to apply the municipal reserve. They don't have to apply municipal reserve. They can apply it only in certain circumstances, but that's your decision to make, and that's the discretion that you have within the Act. So let's drill a little bit deeper to understand how that works. So the parcel of land that's subject to the subdivision proposal is what is valued, and sometimes that's called the parent parcel. So what exists as of the date the application is complete, before the subdivision, probably before any change in zoning is done. It's the subdivision application that triggers the potential for municipal reserve. So you can't apply for municipal reserve unless there's an application for subdivision. It's the pre-subdivision status of the parcel that determines the characteristics of the parent parcel. So what was there as of the date of application? And we also determine reserve based on bare land, so we ignore the improvements on the property. So why do we just do the vacant land and not the improved property? Well, the assumption is that these lands are taken in reserve for future development, and the Act specifies what sorts of things municipal reserve land can be used for, including recreation centers, parks, services that have value for the residents within the municipality or enhance the services of the municipality. And there's a list in the Act that I'm not going to get into. So if you're taking reserve land for future development, you don't want the buildings. That's a liability to you, and well, it's a liability. You're looking for land that you can develop. So if that's the kind of land that you're going to take, if you take land, then it follows that if you're going to take money in lieu of land, you would be taking vacant land. So that's why we value the property as vacant. So let's look at an example. You might recognize this from a few months ago. This was an actual application. The parent parcel is a titled 40-acre parcel. It's got a huge wetland on it, so there's maybe 12 or 15 acres of arable land on it. But remember, I'm supposed to be appraising the titled parcel. So I'm appraising a 40-acre parcel, and one of the characteristics of that 40-acre parcel is that it's got this huge wetland. That wetland is a benefit to the arable land. The arable land sells as a premium because of the wetland, but the land that's covered by water sells at a discount. So when I look at my sales, I have to make those sorts of adjustments, recognizing a premium on the arable land and reducing the value on the land that's covered by water. So that's kind of the process that I have to look at. I can't ignore the fact that it's 40 acres. I have to value it as a 40-acre parcel. Let's look at another example. Let's say we have a 100-acre parcel, and the owner wants to subdivide 25 acres. The municipal reserve is calculated on 10% of the value of the 100-acre parcel. And that subdivision results in a 25-acre parcel and a 75-acre parcel. Let's say the next year that landowner comes back and wants to subdivide the 25 acres into 5-acre parcels. The municipal reserve would be calculated 10% of the 25-acre parent parcel. What's that 25-acre parcel worth? And maybe it's no longer agricultural land, maybe the zoning has changed. So again, what's the situation of that 25-acre parcel when the application is made? And let's say this guy's really likes subdividing, so he comes back in year 3 and wants to subdivide out a 30-acre parcel out of the 75-acre parcel. The municipal reserve is 10% of the value of that 75-acre parcel. Again, remember that it's the application for municipal reserve that triggers the opportunity to take municipal reserve. And municipal reserve is determined based on the parcel that's to be subdivided, and the value of that parcel is appraised with an effective date within 35 days of that window. 35 days of the application, so within that window. So there was some talk about deferring taking the municipal reserve. You can defer it for 10 years or 20 years, or usually it's triggered by the subsequent, the next subdivision on that parcel. But at the end of the day, it's going to be valued based on the size of the parcel as of that date of subdivision within 35 days of the application being made. So by deferring, it doesn't change the effective date. The effective date is in the legislation. This might be a good time for any questions. Yes.
Up there, you say if you subdivide a 100-acre parcel into 25 acres, MR is 10% of the 100-acre parcel?
Yes.
So you have two parcels, a 25 and a 75. Then you say if you
Okay,
apply
that doesn't
to,
exist on the date the first application is made.
but we get the subdivision,
Mm-hmm.
then you can take MR on the 25 acres and on the 75 acres again?
Yes.
That's not the way I
It's
understood it.
it's,
I think the way it's written is the MR is 10% of the value of the 100-acre parcel.
Right.
It's not 10% of the 100 acres. It's 10% of the value based
Right.
on the 100-acre parcel.
yeah, every time there's an application for a subdivision, that triggers the opportunity to take municipal reserve. Now, this is not what normally happens. Normally, you have one owner who will subdivide off a piece of property, and then that property exists for 20 years until it's sold, and maybe the subsequent owner will take a subdivision, and then there's not a lot of subdivision activity that's occurring. Sometimes you'll see, a 25-acre parcel subdivided off, sold, and then the new owner decides, I'm going to subdivide it. So it's the parcel that's being subdivided, and you have an opportunity to take municipal reserve every time there's an application.
You can take MR on the same parcel multiple times.
Well, you start off with a 100-acre parcel, it's subdivided, the 100-acre parcel doesn't exist anymore.
That's right.
So now you have a 75-acre parcel, you can subdivide that parcel, so there's an application on that 75-acre parcel. Now you can take a municipal reserve on that parcel. It's not a very efficient way to do it, and when you get into urban areas where you've got a quarter section that's going to be all subdivided up for various commercial and residential reasons, they'll come in with one application. In rural municipalities, again, this doesn't often happen. It's one subdivision per generation kind of thing, or per ownership. That's typically what happens.
Is that what we've been doing? Because that says to me, we get 10% of the value of the 100-acre parent. So that's 10 acres. And the guy comes in for a 2-acre subdivision, we take 10 acres of municipal reserve. Isn't that what it says?
That's not what we do. The value is based on that 100-acre
Right.
parcel, so you can take reserve for the 25 acres, 10%
But it
of it.
says up there for
I
the
know,
100.
that's- you can only take municipal reserve once on a parcel.
Well, that's not what that says, I don't think. It says you're doing it again and again, is it not?
Well, it's different parcels.
But it's the same shovel of dirt. I don't, okay.
And I don't know that this was developed specifically for rural municipalities. And so normally in a rural municipality, you have the option of either taking municipal reserve or not, or whatever the various situations are. But you don't have aggressive subdivision on a quarter section of land that gets chunked up, chunked up, chunked up, chunked up. that happens in an urban situation, but you just typically don't have that happening.
That's exactly what happens here.
And in that case, it would, you know, the owner should, it would be more efficient for them to come in with a plan. And if they're going to chunk up a piece of property, to come in, you know, one time and do it.
Trying to find an example.
So, the proposed conditions for. Deferred reserve caveat against parcel to ensure MR. Sorry. An example that I found is from our last MPC meeting regarding subdivision application 2018. I'm actually just going to go to the one before it. 22, and it's about the deferred reserve caveat. I think that's what you're talking about, right, Glenn?
No.
That's not what you're talking about?
Well, I think you're.
Was under the impression we can only take municipal reserve once on a property.
So rather than taking it off that, how big was it? It was 15 acres, 14 acres?
40.
No, not that one. The one that was north of town.
Use your microphone.
That last MPC meeting we had, there was the one north of town with
Yeah.
I don't know, there was 6 on the half-mile road there. It was a 70 acre piece, and we were taking 15 off, and that's the one we deferred the 10% on, because we thought we could only take it off that 15 acre piece. Well, once, so we waited, which we can only take it off once. So we moved it, so it's worth more when they subdivided it. But we could have taken it off of the parent piece.
Alan, would it be possible to get like a legal opinion? Not that I don't trust your expert opinion. Right, and that's what I'm saying. So if maybe we could just have, yeah, absolutely.
But we-
No, and this explanation has been really thorough and very informative for me in understanding the processes that you take to do this for us.
So just for, maybe I'm wrong, it was a 75 acre piece about, and we didn't take the municipal reserve off of that parent piece, correct?
Right.
Yeah, whereas we could have, and then we still could have taken our 10%
That's what's being
on the
proposed today,
15
but we need to clarify
acres
that.
that was subdivided. So we missed out on our, okay.
Alan, would it be possible to get a legal opinion on that? Are you reading the MTA?
Is
I
that,
was
is that
looking at
correct?
it too.
So, last meeting, we had a piece, 75 acres of a parent piece, and the applicant wanted to subdivide 15 acres, and we didn't take the municipal reserve on that 75 acre parent piece because we thought we could only do it once, so we wanted to save it for that 15 acres for when it's subdivided as country residential. But that's not correct in what we've been presented. But then if you wanted to subdivide that. Okay. Megan, you were the, yeah, was that correct about Is that how it kind of worked? I might be wrong, but. Okay.
I can identify it in the Municipal Government Act, Section 663. Subdivision authority may not require the owner of a parcel of land that is subject to a proposed subdivision to provide reserve land or money in place of reserve land if A, one lot is to be created from a quarter section of land. So if there's only one lot, you cannot take municipal reserve. B, the land is to be subdivided into lots of 16 acres or more and is not to be used for agricultural purposes, you cannot take MR. Sorry, did I say acres? I apologize, 16 hectares. C, the land is to be subject to, is to be subdivided is 0.8 hectares or less. Or D, reserve land, environmental reserve, or money in place of it was provided in respect of the land that is the subject of the proposed subdivision. So if there's an MR or an environmental reserve in there, you can't include that in the MR amount. And then if you go to section 666, subsection 1, may require the owner of a parcel of land is subject to proposed subdivision A to provide part of the parcel or of land as municipal reserve, school reserve, or municipal and school reserve. B, to provide money in place of school reserve, municipal reserve, or municipal and school reserve. That's under section 666, subsection 1. So it's pretty clear that you can only take it on that subdivided amount. So if it's 25 acres, you can only take, it's the valuation is based, like it said on there, based on the whole 100-acre parcel, but you can only take 10% of that 25-acre subdivision. That's exactly what that says.
That's what we've been doing.
That's what we do, yes.
Yeah. And we can only take it once. Once the reserve has been taken on that 2-point-some acres, we can't take it again.
That's what I understand. We'll reconfirm with the lawyer on that.
Okay. Because that's, I just pulled one up here from, that's exactly what we do. You assessed it at $16,000 an acre for the entire parcel. And the municipal reserve was 10% of that on the 3.2 acres, which come to $5,000. Yeah.
I think the only thing we need to clarify is that once the 25 acres, if the person goes, if we take MR, if it gets re-subdivided again, I don't believe we can get MR again, but we'll just reconfirm that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
You can only take it once is what I've always been told.
Yeah.
We'll just reconfirm that.
Reconfirm that.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Welschuk about the appraisal process?
Anybody told you you look like Bill Murray?
Well, we appreciate you coming in and providing that information for us. Thank you. Can we have a motion to accept his information? Thanks, Donna. All in favor? Motion is carried. So I believe our fire services bylaw was up next.
Can I add on to my report?
Sure.
And we're back.
Good afternoon, Stuart.
Afternoon, I'm back again.
So we had a new proposed draft for the fire services bylaw. Stuart, did you want to present on it?
With this new presented draft bylaw, we took the original one that was presented last year. From what I understand, there was a fair bit of contention with the first reading of the last bylaw, to put it mildly. So since I started here, we have done a complete review of the bylaw itself in conjunction with staff and the CAO. And we've hammered through, we've gotten rid of a number of contentious items that were within the bylaw. And we've made it a little more streamlined, got rid of a lot of the fluff and just went down to the straight nuts and bolts of what's required for the municipality to have within the bylaw. So within this, once again, it's the responsibilities and duties are lined out for associations as well as county fire departments, roles and responsibilities of officers, and levels of service as well too.
Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the proposed draft?
Just one. I went through it, I didn't see anything, but there's something keeps coming up that I've questioned on our last one, and I'll question it again under, it's nothing to do with what we've been fighting with, but it's under fireworks, there's two statements there and they contradict each other. I was wondering if it would make more sense to get rid of the first statement under the fireworks policy,
Under 10.6?
10.5 and 6, yeah. First one says, no person shall use firecrackers or permit the use of firecrackers on, and the second one says, no person shall sell, possess, or discharge fireworks, and I don't see any difference between the two of them. That's my question. To me, there's no difference between a firecracker and a firework. They're all the same thing.
Firecrackers are way more.
If I may, through the chair, under the Explosives Act for Natural Resources Canada, firecrackers are a low expansion explosive device just to go bang. A firework is one that is launched and creates color and noise, whereas firecrackers are illegal within the confines of Canada.
Oh, okay. Okay.
However, that doesn't stop people from bringing them back from the States.
Yeah, okay. Well, that explains it, because to me, they were all the same. They always have been, and they're always. If it'll blow your hand off, it's a firework to me.
But, I mean, you can play with fireworks too, so either or.
I know. Okay.
So one note,
That's
while
my
we're
question.
on that section, in the fire commissioner's comments, he had made a note that any references to codes should be just left as currently in force. And I don't think that was changed in a few spots. So it's referenced the 2014 Alberta Fire Code and the NRC regulations from 1985. So just in order to have to update this less frequently, I don't know what council's feelings are on keeping the years out and just put as current code.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to go. And then that way you don't have to try to keep up with the
That's what
code
I'm
changes.
thinking. And
So-
then it can reduce issues. There is another section, and I don't know how much we want to get into, but the Forest and Prairie Protection Act, it's referenced the 2000 edition, as well as the MGA. There's a few spots there that you might just want to go through and clean that up. Any other questions or comments now, keeping in mind that this is just first reading?
I'm going to put first reading on the floor. I did it last time and they threw it off, so I'll put it back on there again, see if they throw it out again.
There's a motion on the floor. Questions or comments?
I know public hearings aren't necessary.
Glenn did make an addition to the agenda.
Okay.
Oh, right, I'm sorry. So there is an addition to the agenda following this to hold a public hearing. I do have some comments. So in light of the report from the fire commissioner, one of the things that he highlighted throughout his report was the breadth of the span of control for the regional fire chief, and the fact that all other chief officers seem to report directly to him or her, although in some areas it's referenced that it's more of a collaborative, or I forget the language used, I have it highlighted. I'll just be honest with my concern. The last time we did this draft, we had to rescind our first reading because there was more than textual amendments. As well, the process that was shared with council was that prior to this coming to council, that there would be some collaboration or I don't know the right word to use, but some consultation with our fire associations. My understanding from the last time I spoke with them, there hasn't yet been any kind of sharing of or any discussion surrounding this with any of them. The other thing that the fire commissioner highlighted was that he thought that this was a highly operational bylaw, and I still do see a fair amount, and I appreciate that some was taken out, but we went from a 36-page bylaw to a 33-page bylaw. I did see a big section with the budgets, I believe, was removed, which is, I think a lot of people agreed was more of an operational or an agreement, perhaps, appropriate for in the agreement. Just council's thoughts. I know we've been at this for a long time. We do have a bylaw in force, so like, I'm mindful of the time that we've spent doing this, but council's thoughts. I don't want to be the only one talking.
I'm sort of the same opinion in the fact that this doesn't look a whole lot different than what we had. And if we have no collaboration with just any feedback, whether or not we take the feedback, we should allow for feedback. And I'm just going through the review of the county from the commissioner, and I think a couple of things have still been missed on this, and I'd really like to get to make sure that we get all the recommendations from the fire commissioner in the so I'm neither here nor there on first reading. It's just that I'm not sure this is what we should be pushing forward. I think we should be probably be looking at this bylaw, and I think making it more concise, in my opinion.
Another big thing is, from what I understood when we rescinded the last bylaw and started to work on this, it would be collaborating with the associations to a point, whether that's consulting and saying, well, this is what's not going to change. But I don't know if that's happened. I think we could still do better in that aspect of things, just to understand, to go over some of the maybe word changes or stuff like that, like we did last time. So.
Just a question to administration. Was any discussion had with the fire associations in the drafting of this bylaw?
Through the chair, since I've come here, no.
Okay. Now, all of this being said, in reviewing this and in looking at the previous draft that Councillor Wilson and I worked on with the fire association and our municipal partners, like the village representatives were there as well as some of our fire, I think there was a couple fire chiefs as well that were involved. We all sat down and we were, this close to being in agreement. So it's not that I think we can work with this. It's just a somewhat frustrating process because we bring this document from the fire commissioner in and we're trying to integrate that in. Like, I see the frustration from administration perspective as well. So it's not that I don't think that we can get this, like with some fine tuning or some, discussion, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around the feedback that we got from the fire commissioner and this all being kind of.
I think it's close enough. It's close enough that I can support first reading if we can commit to some consultation and with the associations before the public hearing, so they're not being sprung anything on, and then we'll bring changes back for that second reading and public hearing is what I'd like to see. And I mean, I still think you could probably pass it that day too. So Can I add, do we need a friendly amendment to that to add consultation with the associations?
First reading. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? And the only reason I raised the concerns with first reading is just because of the process from the previous draft that we had to rescind. I didn't want to waste, or, create more work for us.
I think we tried to, and I appreciate the comments. That's why it's coming for first reading, so we can get that feedback. I think we tried to accommodate and integrate the comments that we heard from the first go-around into that. And I think you'll notice that I believe most of them are in there. Maybe we missed some,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah,
I think
no,
we've
I
got
did
most of them in there.
appreciate that for sure.
Yeah.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? All in favor? First reading has passed.
I'll move that.
I'd like to move public hearing for the bylaw for April the 2nd. Give lots of time for some collaboration to take part, but yeah. At the end of the day, I think would be.
Yeah, so I did talk to Deputy Reeve Kester about that yesterday and about the timing on that. So we do have the auditors coming on April 2nd, I believe, as well as our budget finalization, hopefully. So it'll probably be in the afternoon, like we'll try to set a time like 3 o'clock or something like that. So, because it'll be fairly busy otherwise, I think. So just if that's okay with council. So if maybe we should just set that in the motion, Glenn, if you like, say 3 o'clock, and then that's set in stone and then everybody knows, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Did you want a third motion?
Yeah, please, I'll move that staff and 2 counselors, is 2 counselors good enough? Sit down with 1 representative from each association to fine tune and consult. Just kind of look over.
Similar process to what we did previously. Alan?
So I have a question. You said association, which is who the agreement would be with. You're okay with that? Okay, so the villages would not be in attendance on that?
I don't think so. They need to be. I do not think they need to be. I'll look at the camera and say it.
Okay, we got 5 different associations, 5 different associations. They are different, every one of them. And in some that they only have the association, and some the association controls the whole thing, and another one, the village more or less takes over the whole thing. It's the fire service that we want. I'm not so interested in who's there. I want to have a good service at the end of the day. So if it's village, I'll say Rocky Ford wants to come. I don't see the harm in it. I mean, why? What's we have to get along, and if they don't like it, the association won't like it, then we're no further apart. So I would say leave it open to the villages too. For me, I can only support that.
Didn't, through the chair, did not the fire commissioner in his comments state that if this goes into effect for the municipality, that it would be nice to see the villages copycat the same thing into theirs? So you can't do that without them being part of the process.
It's part of, it's an opportunity we have to build something here, and we want to have matching bylaws at the end of the day. Why separate different parties out? I don't see the logistics or why we should do it. These departments are older than the county is itself. The department's been there for ever since I can remember. And it was always there, and it was always in the village. And originally the village put up the building and paid the heating costs, and the farmers paid for the fire truck. And things have progressed since that day. And they share, right, what each one can share in, that's what they share in. It's one and the same.
May I ask that we move on with the presentation and we can hold the rest of the conversation off? And I will rescind my motion until we have a closed session.
Sure.
One other comment. If we're going to collaborate staff with the associations between first reading and public hearing, is it appropriate for just some council to be there? Does that prelude the spread of free information to the other councilors is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to our 2 o'clock appointment. I'd like to welcome Sergeant Delaronde from the Strathmore RCMP detachment.
Don't worry, we won't shoot you. I'll get the temperature of the room first.
Welcome. If you want to just state your name for the record, and just a note, our meetings are recorded and maybe posted online.
Hey, it's Dennis Delaronde, the Acting Detachment Commander for Strathmore Detachment. First, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to come to your meeting. At the same time, I'd like to apologize for not getting you the documents in advance. They're more for just a reference as we go through a couple things, but the office manager who prints these off, who actually sets the search fields up to print them off, she was off, so I wasn't able to get them until this morning. The numbers on there are a little bit confusing, I guess, in that there's 2 schools of thought on it. The more police are out there, the more calls there's going to be, which was what everybody would think, but it should be actually the contrary. The more police are out there, less people are going to be inclined to do things that they shouldn't be doing. But there's a number of things that are self-generated when they're out there doing these patrols, that they're actually catching people speeding and this kind of thing. So those numbers should go up, which they have. And kind of an interesting number that I noticed this morning was, so these dates are up on the corner. And the reason why you have this, explain the documents, there's one paper that says, up in the upper left-hand corner, Calgary Urban Strathmore WHC. There's not a lot on that one, but that was that WHC is not a code that we use anymore, but just in the interest of completeness, I brought it along as well. If you look on, yes, each group of papers should have that. So the difference is Calgary Urban versus Southern Alberta. So what I did was I got our office managers to pull off the numbers from September 1st to January 31st, from 2017 September 1st to 2018 January 31st, and 2018 September 1st to 2019 January 31st. In the 2019 to 2018, the overall call volume, and these numbers are solely for calls for service in Wheatland County. They exclude Town of Strathmore and Rocky View County. In the same identical periods, you see there's almost double the number of calls from 1489 to 2309 in 2 periods. So as I started at the beginning, a number of the calls have gone down, and it's kind of hard to compare the way this format of this document, but unfortunately, this is what I'm left with. At the bottom of each violation group, I guess, you can see the ones like for self-generated stuff, like moving traffic violations. I'll refer to 2017-09 to 2018-0131 as last year, and I'll refer to the other ones this year. So from last year, there was a total of 504. This year, there's 1,423. So a significant increase. If you look at the speeding in itself, last year there was 250, this year is 970.
Thanks for your contributions, Tom.
And these kind of numbers, these are solely based on members being on the road more available to take calls, whether going to a call or coming from a call or just doing general patrol. They're actually out there, and this is a result of them being out there. The ones that were kind of a sore spot with everybody was on this year's report. It'd be on page, even I get lost trying to follow these, page 7, and on last year's report, because the numbers vary year to year, that's why they end up on different pages. On page 6 of last year, you look at the one example is like a theft of truck. Last year there was 20, and this year there's 5. So those kind of essentially crimes of opportunity, I think, have decreased significantly. And again, I attribute that to members being on the road more. And there's some calls for service that I don't think it matters what you do is going to change them. The general police calls, mental health act, suspicious people, those go up, which is a good thing because then those people are more cognizant of what's going on in their area. The other one was, so you look at on this year's page 8, and on same page 8 on last year's, the break and enter violation group. Last year it was 31, and this year it's 15. A lot of these significant incidents have decreased, whereas the self-generated stuff has increased. And again, I attribute that to members being on the road more available for calls. And that comes about solely, in my opinion, because of the watch clerks. The days of submitting paper disclosure are done. It's all electronic disclosure now. And without the watch clerks, the members would be stuck in the office doing original court package, getting it reviewed, getting it back, making a copy for the file and a copy for the Crown, copy for defense. And so that's all the time that they don't have to do anymore because it's all electronic. They do, essentially they'll do the prosecutor's information sheet, which is details of what happened. And then they got a cover sheet that says whatever reports have to be attached to it for disclosure. And the watch clerks get all that information. They scan it all. It's sent electronically to the watch commander. He reviews it. When he puts his stamp on it's good, goes back to the watch clerk, they upload it and it's gone. So essentially the actual member is doing the investigation, only does the initial disclosure, and the rest is done by the watch clerks.
Just a question. So maybe I missed it, but so you said this was all of Wheatland County? These
Yes.
stats?
In our area of
your-
responsibility.
Okay. Okay, that was the question.
And I think as well, the members out doing an investigation, to me, there's two sides of the file. There's the operational side and the admin side. The operational side is where you make sure you have all your necessary information. The admin side is scoring and stuff that they don't really care too much about. The data quality, pardon me, is hit and miss. With the watch clerks, they're able to go back in there and ensure that the scoring is done properly, so the jurisdiction where the offense occurred, lack of a better term, gets credit for it, so it's recognized where it took place. On a day-to-day basis, those stats don't mean too much to a member, but down the road, seeking additional resources, crime severity index and all that, they do have an impact on it. So it's crucial that we get them correct.
Don't just use your microphone, Ben. Thanks.
The check stops shows 9 in 2018 and none in 2017 to 2018? You didn't have any last year?
Yes, but there's, again, this is data quality. Nobody's opening a check stop file when you should be opening one. And since I took over the detachment in February of last year, these little administrative processes were never recognized or corrected.
So they had check stops last year, they just didn't record them.
Yeah. So what we do on a daily basis, every shift, they do what's called a daily occurrence report, which is a quick overview of what happened during that shift, in case you got to pass things over. So they're recording the check stops on there, but they weren't actually opening a PROS file for it to get the statistics on it. And I know that's false because there's mandatory check stops that we have to do for the National Impaired Driving Program and stuff like that. So they just, there's administrative oversight on their part, which now the watch clerks are catching and correcting it. Couple things here.
So me being the redneck that I am, I'm curious, the break and enters have went down substantially, but I mean, that's nothing to do with perhaps the violators being a little more weary when entering private property?
No, because they generally don't have an address where they're going to. They cruise around until they find a place of opportunity. And I think with the police officers being out there a lot more, it discourages that kind of behavior. Vehicle theft, we've kind of honed in on that. Pardon me, honed in on that a bit and dealt with by and large, it's a small group of people doing the majority of the crime. And so we've kind of focused on them. And I think that's been the result of our actions, that the theft of vehicles has gone down. In everyday policing, the first line of policing is a police presence. And I know I'd go the other way if I was going to do something and I saw a police car. It's just, but I mean, there are people that will wait for you to drive by and try and do things, eh? And I think being freed up from those administrative functions has allowed them to be out more. And now that we have the watch clerks in place, for the most part, I can go out on the floor and say, why are you here? Whereas before they'd say, I got to do this. Well, no, you don't. The watch clerks do that out on the road. And I've actually so we got so many provincial positions, and I've actually assigned members to the county. So at the end of the day, I want to see what you did in the county in terms of traffic enforcement and stuff like that. A way of holding them accountable, and same as the town and the other county. So it kind of.
I have a question. As detachment commander, do you keep any kind of records or statistics around complaints? Like for, like calls that came in that weren't responded to or not responded to in a timely manner or things like that? Like this is a a challenging kind of expenditure for us to evaluate because there, like you alluded to, there's so many factors that play into crime. And like, of course, like you said, some are going to go up because your officers are out patrolling more. Some are likely going down because there is a greater police presence. Anecdotally, I'm hearing that responses are better. Like people are, like Tom, absolutely seeing you out more of that. But even in some of our rural areas, I'm hearing that like they're seeing RCMP where they haven't seen RCMP in a long time, and they appreciate that presence. But have you noticed anything on the complaint side? Because as a council representative, I fielded some complaints, even campaigning, I heard a lot like about, you know, RCMP not responding, that kind of thing. And I was encouraging people to follow up with a supervisor or that type of thing with RCMP.
There's been very few, and I always, in every public forum I get into, if somebody's not satisfied with the service, let me know, and then I can address it, and I will follow up with whoever let me know about it.
Okay. Any other questions?
And I think our relationship with the county officers has grown. We've got into a little bit more, I guess, lack of a better term, formalized process in terms of sharing information, intelligence and stuff. And I think that's working a lot better. As with everything, there's growing pains. What can we release? What can we not release? But I'm of the opinion we're all on the same team. So unless it's got, you know, highly confidential information, give it to the guys and we'll work together on it.
Excellent.
So have you heard the other partners in Strathmore and the Rocky View County, are they going ahead, as far as you know, with funding watch clerks permanently or for at least for the next year? Have you talked to them on that? Is that just a
No, it's hard to nail the guy down who does it, and I think there's a little bit of, I don't know, turmoil perhaps in the town office. And I have a meeting in 2 weeks with Rocky View County where I'm going to bring forward that very subject.
Because when we first presented at Rocky View, they actually were going for 2 years right off the get-go, were they not?
3 was the original deal, but they ended up going 1. I think that's a little bit of a different situation because of the Langdon solution. But I think there's a couple other processes that are coming in or have been in play just recently. One of them, the goal, my goal is I should walk out in the office and not see anybody but the support staff. Somebody phoned, they lost their driver's license. Well, but they want to talk to a policeman or a police officer. So now they've got this callback unit where there's, I mean, essentially all we do is they went back and looked for it, they didn't find it. So now we have to put it on CPIC to ensure that nobody else is using it, that if you do come across that, it's going to be flagged. So now they've got this callback unit, which will deal with those essentially paperless files. Again, taken away from the members having to make the phone calls and stuff. And we've had a number of files where there's been significant amounts of property seized, numbers-wise. And of course, it involves insurance companies because of the value of the item. And before, it used to be the member had to go back to the office, look at the file, call the insurance company and address whatever they wanted. Now those calls are just funneled right through to the watch clerk and they deal with it. So the member, pardon me, don't even have to deal with it. A watch clerk, I guess by way of information, a watch clerk is nowhere close to being an entry-level job. They're probably 4 or 5 steps above an entry-level job. And so the training that they do, because we're doing the essentially job shadowing, is how they're getting their training. And it's labor intensive and extensive because of the, not every day will you be repeating the same process you did yesterday. Everything is different every day. So that's why there's quite a bit of time to actually train somebody and have them in place. And so we're just coming up now to, so we got 3 that are working with the watches, and the 4th one is just hopefully in the next month and a half we'll be on our own, so we'll have 1 for each watch. Right now there's the 4th watch, they're kind of by committee, they're looking after their needs. So I think it's working quite well. As far as what the province did with their money that they allowed, I have no idea. I can't answer those questions. Well, I have a captive audience. They, the priorities for the county for the upcoming annual performance plan. I'd like to see if we could, strangely enough, through Whelan County, Rocky View County, and the town of Strathmore, the top 4 priorities were exactly the same. So it was easy to roll that into the APP, but we're coming up to developing a new APP for the upcoming year. I would like to take a little bit of a different approach in that the priorities are derived from the constituents of the county. But I think, or I suspect, that there's probably something that would come from elected officials of the county that they'd like to see as a priority. And so I want to have that door open this year to incorporate a component that's just strictly for elected officials of the county, 2 counties in the town.
What's your timeline for that performance review or performance
Well,
plan?
to March 31st this year closes, and then I think I have 20 days to develop a new one. And one thing that wasn't done last year was, throughout this process, there's a document called Acknowledgement and Consultation. And I guess that's to ensure that I don't just sit down and decide what's best for the county and make that. So this year, once the priorities are put into the annual performance plan, I'll be coming around with a document to have it signed by the elected officials to acknowledge that, yes, these are our priorities.
Just for council's information, we have done that in the past. 2013 and 2015, I think council set the priorities, the reeve with council, and then the years in between there, I sat down with each one of the police chiefs and went through each one of the areas. So it's great to have that in the rotation for sure. Yeah.
Do you have any other comments for us? Information?
Nope, and anytime there's a concern, I'm the only dentist in the office. You can just call and ask for Dennis, and I'll try to address your concerns as soon as possible. I didn't want to swamp you guys with numbers, but there's overall in the 2 counties and the town, essentially all crime is trending downward. Some of it pretty significant, and some not so significant, but it gives us area of focus on where to direct our resources. And again, anytime any hotspots come up in the county, if you can inform me, then I can address it.
Excellent. Are there any areas that we can support you, like with lobbying, or obviously justice is always, I know that's a huge thing, but.
No, I think things are going well the way they are. I didn't want to do it, but I will do it. I think it would be a real asset to detachment if the watch clerks were funded beyond a year. I mean, a lot of the detachments are going to it, and I think we've seen the benefits of it. That was my plug.
Fair. Any other questions?
I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to thank you, Dennis, for all the work you've done with the county and our peace officers. They speak very highly of the relationship that our new leadership team with the county and with yourself. So keep up the good work, and I think that helps all of our efforts in reducing crime and for our residents in the area. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I'm good. Thank you.
We have a motion to accept that report as information. Thanks, Donna. All in favor? Motion is carried. Before we go back to the fire bylaw, Glenn had requested to add something to his report.
Got to turn my mic on. A few notes on Wheatland Housing. Last meeting we had, Town of Strathmore offered up one of their employees, Doug, to coordinate between the board and the province to get some help in getting a new lodge built. That was nice of them. We'll see how that goes. Before Christmas, when a couple of us went up to Edmonton to talk to the ADM about our concept plan, one of the shortcomings to that plan wasn't done yet. We didn't have a business plan. And he iterated that we should try and do it in-house. We don't have to go out and spend money on it. And in fact, the last one they accepted was done in-house. I had a short conversation with our CAO. If county was, I know at the lodge we don't have the resources. I asked Ellen if we would have the capabilities of it. He said give him some time. I talked to him here just a week or so ago, and he thinks he can do it in-house, and if you're not capable of getting it all done, we have to get a third party out for some of it, that would be okay too. So is that kind of still in that position, Ellen? So if there's any questions, otherwise I'll make a motion that the county help with a business plan and consult with our lodge people and do it for the same price that Strathmore is charging pro bono, and unless there's any third-party consultants that we need to bring in to finish it. I'll make that a motion and then I'll ask for questions. Am I clear enough in such a short time?
Are there any questions regarding that?
Before the audit. The audit.
All right, all in favor of Glenn's motion? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Of course.
I am not sure if everybody knows the requisition went up 9.7%. So just so the council knows that the requisition didn't increase. So we're gonna have to modify the budget for that. So I know there's good rationale behind that. I don't know if you want to speak to it, Glenn.
I can, what was it, $40,000 in carbon tax that we're not allowed to charge the residents to recover from?
It's from you, Notley.
Any other question? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that, Glenn. Why don't we look at the correspondence and then we'll do our closed sessions. So there was correspondence circulated, a letter from the Village of Standard regarding fire guardians, and the response from the CAO, Wheatland County, the Egg for Life bumper sticker campaign. So They are requesting a donation for their rural safety unit. I don't know if we want an RFD to come back for that or if people have feelings on it now. Alan, is that something we've supported previously?
Not this particular campaign, but we have supported Ag for Life in the past, yes.
Council's thoughts? This was, I think we saw this rural safety unit. Yeah. Okay. There was also, and Alan has circulated the original, the Minister's Senior Service Awards. Does anybody, if anybody has somebody that they would like to nominate, I have the information package here. Maybe it's something you can just reflect on. And if you have somebody you would like to nominate, please let me know and I'll get the package to you. And lastly, we have a letter from the town of Strathmore. This is in follow-up to previous correspondence from them, just indicating that they would like us to consider paying the 2018 and 2019 CRISP funding as it had been previously outlined in an agreement that was not agreed to for the 5 years. With the town of Strathmore, it was with the villages. So they would like the funding as it was for that for 2018 and 2019. And then they would like to enter into negotiations for a fair and reasonable funding formula for 2020 and beyond, with the assistance of a third-party consultant just to look at usage and costs. And I'm not sure if we can get into some cost recovery kind of ratios with that and that type of thing as well. But I think that would all be open for discussion going forward. Council's thoughts?
I will, we can have a discussion after the motion. I'll move that we accept their request to fund years 18 and 19 through the funding agreement. No. Save my next motion. As per the original agreement, and then I will have another motion after.
Should we not, that not sort of be the whole, like the whole 5 years so we can get everybody on sync? I mean,
They're on a 5-year sync. Everybody else is on 5 years. They
yeah,
opted out.
I understand that, but should we not be requesting them to get onto the 5-year sync and then?
They, Alan, correct me, the term ended at the end of 2020 for that term, or was it 2019?
That's correct. So the original term, the original agreement was 5 years for all the partners, all the villages, the
17,
two
18,
hamlets.
19. No,
Yeah,
16,
the
17.
two hamlets and the town of Strathmore. Strathmore decided that they didn't want to do 18 and 19 with the pending CMRB and where that was going to go. So now they've had a change of heart. So this does keep it in sync with the 5 years. Yes. So the only thing with that motion, I wanted to have Brian here to kind of explain the 2018 CRISP funding, how that would be funded and where that would be funded from. The 2019 has not been included in the budget, but if council approves that motion, we will include it in the final draft of the budget. But 2018 is a bit of a different kettle of fish because we didn't have it in the 2018 budget. So.
Yes, the 2018 funding, because there was no legal obligation in 18, it wasn't budgeted for, because currently still as it sits, there is no legal obligation to pay that. So if there is a council motion made to pay for 18 and 19, both of those amounts will need to be included in the 2019 budget. So an adjustment will be done depending on council's decision on that.
Thank you.
Oh, me too, but if they suffer, we suffer.
Also for council's information, the amount for 2018 is roughly 190,000. And then the amount for 2019 is still to be determined, and what it'll be determined after the assessment's finalized. And that formula is based on non-residential assessments, so we still have to kind of wait for those numbers to be finalized. They'll be finalized as of February 28th.
Perfect.
If I were to make an estimate, I'd probably say around 370,000, 400,000.
Is there any further discussion or questions? There's a motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
I also have another issue with the town of Strathmore, and I think we talked about it quite in depth last time, and it was for issues pertaining to Strathmore and us, strictly just those two municipalities. And we've had the conversation of sitting down and meeting council to council, and I thought that was going to go through until the last conversation council had, and I'd rather, and being a lunch meeting or just discussion, no decision really came out of it, so I'll put a motion on the floor that I'll move that council set up a council to council meeting with the town of Strathmore to talk about collaboration and a number of issues, that being recreation, industry, and cost saving initiatives. So.
Discussion?
Just one question. When you say council to council, that means no administration or?
Glenn?
Those sound like the exact same issues we have with our villages. And one other thing, if we're talking about this letter, a new approach to the CRIS funding. CRIS funding is between the villages and Strathmore, not just Strathmore. We don't have 5 individual agreements, we have 1.
Just a point of clarification, would you be able to find the agreement? Because I think it started in 2016 and then I think it would end in 2020, and I just want.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And just to clarify, there's actually 2 different agreements. There's the one for the municipalities, being Drumheller, Villages of Hazard, Standard, Rockyford, and the town of Strathmore, which is, they're all the same. They're all the same document. And then with the 2 Hamlet. So that's a little bit different because they're not a municipality. So
I just want to clarify because I think, and there might be some confusion, I think and I'm trying to remember who was saying it. I think somebody was saying that they don't want discussion around the 2020 funds because that would be part of the current agreement. The town of Strathmore has refused, from my understanding, the current funding formula for 2020. And I believe, doesn't that contract that we had, that was signed previously between the municipalities, run till the end of 2020? So just so council's aware of that, we would be renegotiating prior to the end. It would be an early negotiation of that contract. The town of Strathmore,
If we can.
my impression is they will not accept the current terms for 2020.
Yeah, and that's why I think we have to meet with them, council to council, whether it's CRIS funding that we move forward with, funding for Strathmore, or a different funding model compared to the villages.
Glenn?
We have ratepayers across the county. And we're going to enter into or even talk about a separate deal for one municipality and not include the rest of the county. I don't think that's right. They should be part of, and if they don't want to be part of, that's fine, but they should know. We extensively use, I know Drumheller down there in that neck of the woods, that's all they have. And yet they're not included. No, this CRIS money was money that we just come up with to share out. It wasn't a negotiated settlement or nothing. It was just money we offered up. Is it enough? Is it going to stay the same? That's for us. And if they want to talk about that second paragraph there, that's not what the CRIS money was. The CRISP money was, we give it to you, no strings attached, spend it where you want. I don't want to start funding different parts of the county differently. People on the east side deserve their tax money going to help them play racquetball or whatever they want to play, no different than the people on the west side. I think, why split it up and make us into two halves?
Through the chair, I agree with where Glenn's coming from. I keep trying to find in my mind something that we need to negotiate with Strathmore outside and separate from what the other three villages, four, Drumheller, Hazara, Standard Rock, or whatever you want to call it. What is there out there that we need to deal with them differently than the other ones?
So in answer to that, some things that have been brought to my attention through both the mayor and I guess a couple of the councillors from Strathmore is they have proposed that we meet to discuss some ways that we might be able to collaborate on shared servicing, or one idea that was brought forward by one of the councillors, I believe it was the councillor, was that rather than perhaps paying recreation funding to the town, maybe there's a way for us to run a more effective or efficient protective services department. And I'm not at all proposing we do this, or like that I have no judgment on any of these ideas. I'm just saying what's been brought to me is that perhaps if we provided them bylaw services in exchange for they provide our ratepayers recreation services. Sure, okay. Do you want us to take a recess for a few minutes? Okay. And that to me is unique because I haven't had that kind of conversation. Nobody from the Village of Rocky Ford or Standard or Hazar have come forward and said, we would like to discuss sharing some of these services. I think one thing we have to recognize is the scale of the municipalities. Our villages are a valuable partnership to me, and I will defend that till the end of time, and I respect them, but there is a different scale with the town of Strathmore. And in terms of Deputy Reeve Kester brought up Drumheller, they're currently receiving 2.4% of the total CRISP funding. Like on the new news release, it was 17,000 out of 748,000. So I wasn't around when these allocations were determined, but obviously we know where some of our population density is, and and not that this less residents that we have out in the east or like in the far northeast corner, they're still valuable, but they're less dense. A lot of our density is around Strathmore. Our growth has tended to be, our residential growth particularly has been on the west side of the municipality. I think those are some of the factors of what Jason has talked to me about meeting with Strathmore. The town of Strathmore has very openly said that they're happy to bring things to the Wheatland Regional Partnership, but then we're having some of these conversations that might just pertain more to the larger municipalities.
But, there's always a but in there. I hear where you're coming from, but if the other ones find out that we're negotiating with them separately on different deals, they will come and ask for the same thing. Doesn't matter what it is. They'll say, well, how come you're going to pay them for this? You're not going to pay us for that same thing. If we're going to negotiate, if we're going to do any of this sharing, it has to be we all have to be at the table. Whether we all get the same share, whether we all agree on the same thing may not end up that way, but we all have to be at the table when we make those decisions. Or we're going to be meeting with 4 different municipalities.
I think if you're purely speaking about financial allocations, I agree with you. And I know we've had and I'm not sure if it was at lunch or like in a more informal setting, we had a conversation about perhaps we need to look at the total amount of CRISP funding. Maybe it needs to be a bigger number and still be allocated in a similar way, that type of thing. But what I'm not hearing is the villages coming to us and saying, for the thing with bylaw services, they don't have bylaw officers or they don't have specific recreation facilities. And when I'm speaking about recreation facilities, I'm speaking more to the ones that cost recovery is less likely on, like a swimming pool, for example, where we're providing, those types of exchanges of value, if you will.
I think it's important to note that it's not just recreation that we're going to be talking about. Sure, funding's part of that, and I think if you're going to be talking about rec facilities, which previous councils have already committed to being jointly associated with Town of Strathmore and Golden Hills, I think funding has to go with those facilities, because if we're going to be putting money into those joint facilities, we have to have an idea on their funding, and they have to have an idea of ours.
We have a diverse county. What is wrong with the residents in one part of the county knowing what the concerns are of the residents in another part of the county? Each appreciating our differences and our strengths and our common goals. We're different across, we're different the way we think, we're the different way we fund activities. I don't see the problem why we all can't get together and negotiate a crisp funding model or sports models, or I don't want to see the county become divided. We just had a fire bylaw and we want collaboration. Everybody talk together. Now we're trying to split everybody up and talk to everybody. I don't think that's right. Let's be.
I don't see this as making it, I see this as hearing more ideas coming forward. Chris funding is a fantastic model, but it may not be the model that we can continue with down the road. There may have to be adjustments on these models. We have to find out points of agreement with the Town of Strathmore. What comes out of these meetings, I don't know. But it's just because somebody else isn't included in the meeting doesn't mean there's not going to be any decisions made. The decisions that are going to be made will still have to come before council, and if there's money involved in, if any of it is financial, it will have to be voted on by council. So I believe that we have to, I would like to say that we could do this all as one thing, but I've watched how Strathmore handles the regional partnership meetings, and you don't hear a word from them. They're not comfortable in that setting, so I'm willing to give this a try. I want to find out what's going forward with them, other than what I'm guessing.
If we want to take the analogy of the fire services one step further, so we are going to collaborate with the fire associations collectively, but we have just gone through a process of also meeting individually with each fire association. Ben, you were there when we met with Hazar. Glenn and I have met with Dallam and Rosebud, and we've also on a separate occasion met with Rocky Ford, and in the future we're going to be meeting with Standard. That doesn't in any way separate or give preferential treatment to one of those associations. It was just an opportunity to have more one-on-one conversation with issues that might be specific to that association, and just quite frankly some more kind of nitty-gritty conversation that applied just to that fire association, and that was actually by request of the association. So Glenn, I was just taking your analogy with the fire services one step further and saying that sometimes meeting, like we've just gone through the process of meeting with the fire associations, we still have one meeting upcoming, but meeting with them individually and just to look at the needs, have some frank conversation. It's not making any one of them more important than the others or different necessarily in how we'll treat them, but it's an opportunity to meet with them, hear their concerns one-on-one, and then we bring that information back to council and use that going forward to try and get the best fire service for our municipality possible. I think I see this potential meeting with Strathmore as something like that. Simply an opportunity for our two councils to sit down, discuss things that are more pertinent. And I agree with you, there's going to be things that are going to come out of there that are going to be region-wide, like for our entire region, including the villages. And we're going to say this needs to come back to Wheatland Regional Partnership. And I absolutely think recreation is a regional issue. Like that, to me, that's definitive. But there may be other opportunities that, and I don't even know what they are until we sit down and have some of these frank conversations with their council.
So through the chair, something Tom says kind of, yeah, maybe Strathmore's a little scared to say anything. I don't know, you call it scared or whatever it is, but if you haven't got the guts to bring up your issues, just because there's 4 or 5 more people sitting at a meeting, then maybe it isn't worth discussing in the first place. These meetings, if we're looking at something regional, anything we do with any one of the partners becomes a regional issue because we have to explain it one way or the other to the rest of the partners. And I don't vision seeing the first few meetings being very, very friendly. There may be some hostile comments, but eventually they will come around and they'll start understanding what each and every one of those villages has certain little things. Strathmore has certain things. They'll start understanding each other. They'll start looking at what the other ones need, and you'll start coming up with a program that works. But if we have to come up with a program for Strathmore, then we sit down, and I'll guarantee you, you won't make it work if you go out and visit with Hazard, then you go out and visit with Standard, then you go out and visit with Rocky Ford. Then you're putting them against each other because now they're wondering what they're doing with. You're going to end up doing the 3 villages by themselves and Strathmore by themselves, and you're still going to be split. I can't see anything wrong with having 14 people sitting in a room to start it. And if you need to get the thing going, if you need somebody there to moderate the thing, so it takes it out of your hands, it takes it out of their hands, it puts it into the hands of a what do you call them guys that do that kind of stuff? Facilitator. Give them ideas of what you're looking at, let the facilitator take it over and start it. You'll come up with what you need to do, but I do not like meeting with, it's like the old adage, if you got 2 kids fighting in the playground and you meet with each one of them separately with their parents, you're going to come up with 2 different options. You bring all the parents into the room, you bring the kids into the room, and you bring the teachers into the room, and you sit down and you hash it out and you come up with something that works. You're never going to get it to work if you keep meeting them separately. I don't agree with that. Doesn't matter how big they are.
Margaret, would you mind rereading the motion? Or if you want to reiterate it. Topics.
I'll ask for a recorded vote.
So just on this topic, I had brought in a public council meeting the fact that there was this request to have this meeting with the town of Strathmore. And I actually had after bringing it forward to the council and not hearing any of these concerns, I actually had already previously reached out to the mayor to try and set this up. That hasn't happened yet. But just so that there's transparency that I did, because I had heard this from more than one councillor and I had brought it as part of my report to council. I had started that initiative. So I want to be transparent about my role in this and representing council accurately. Are there any other comments? Yes, vote. All in favor? Councillor Eichert, Reeve Link, Councillor Bigger, and Councillor Wilson. Opposed? Motion is carried. I believe that's our agenda. Oh, yes, thank you. A motion to accept the correspondence.
In Strathmore's letter, they had a second request.
On their letter, the third-party organization, the consultant. Are you okay with that, Ben, if we defer that? Yep. So it's a request to hire a third-party consultant to study the usage, And this was actually initially, we have discussed this in council previously. There was some conversation that the town of Strathmore initially thought they may have capacity to do this in-house. And it looks like they agree that it might be good to have an objective third-party person to help facilitate some of that study.
Alan, on the facilities, recreational facilities board that they're putting together in that I sit on in Strathmore, would that group not be sort of doing it along that same lines? They'll be, because they're going to have to be figuring out who's going to be using the facilities and going forward, right?
Yeah, I think they may be doing some of that. I can talk to Mike and just see what their scope is again. Certainly can. One of the other things that, you know, in light of what Deputy Reeve Kester and Armstrong mentioned in regards to recreation, perhaps, you know, it may be prudent for the county to look at what services are provided in Azar and Rockyford and Stannard. Because I think we know in some of the municipality doesn't provide any recreation service. It's provided by the community. So, you know, that might be something to consider following this conversation with Strathmore, to open it up and say, we want to look at those communities as well, just to understand exactly how much the municipality is really putting into recreation. Because it does vary from each municipality. They're a bit unique, so just keep that in mind.
And the recreation piece, I certainly see it as a regional issue. Like, we need to look at use in our municipality and in the villages within our municipality as well as the town. Like, it's a complex issue. It's not simply our residents going outside and using facilities. We have facilities in Wheatland County that are utilized by other municipalities as well. So that's all going to have to be looked at in the future. Alan, I think I forgot, Margaret mentioned you had a comment about the EOEP course? Okay, all right. Yes, Glenn.
Also, our number one expenditure in the county is infrastructure, roads.
Yes.
I think that should be part of the conversation too. With the regional thing, because we are responsible for the roads and they drive on our roads probably more than we do.
Absolutely. Any other conversation about the correspondence? All in favor? Motion's passed. We have a couple 3 in-camera items. We'll just move into the conference room for those.